Hello friends, welcome to the Point. In today's session, let's discuss about Central Asian contacts and their results. So the period which began about 200 BC, it did not witness any large empire like Maurya Empire, but it is very notable for intimate and widespread contacts between Central Asia and India. So in eastern part of India, central India and the Deccan, the Mauryas were succeeded by number of native rulers like Sungas, Kanvas and the Satavahanas. So in the northwestern India, Mauryas were succeeded by number of ruling dynasties from Central Asia. The Indo-Greeks. There was number of series of invasions that took place about 200 BC. And the first to cross the Hindu Kush were the Greeks, and these Greeks, they ruled Bactria, which was lying south of Oxus River in the area that is covered by northern Afghanistan. The invaders came one after another, but some of them ruled at one and the same time on parallel lines. And one important cause of invasions, it was the weakness of Seleucid Empire. This Seleucid Empire, it has been established in Bactria and the adjoining areas of Iran, which is called as Parthia. So on account of growing pressure by Scythian tribes, the later Greek rulers, they were enabled to hold power in this area. And along with the construction of Chinese wall, the Scythians, they were not allowed in a position to move forward into China. So they turned their attention towards the neighboring dynasties like Greeks and Parthians. Pushed by the Scythian tribes, the Bactrian Greeks, they were forced to invade India at that time. And the successors of Ashoka, they were very weak to stem the tide of foreign invasion with the Greeks. And in the beginning of the 2nd century BC, the Indo-Greeks, they occupied a large part of northwestern India, and that they occupied much larger area which was conquered by Alexander itself. And it is said that they pushed forward as far as Ayodhya and Pataliputra. But these Greeks, they failed to establish a united rule in India. Two Greek dynasties, they ruled northwestern India on parallel lines at one and the same time. The most famous Indo-Greek ruler was Menander or Milinda. Milinda, the other name of Menander. So Milinda's capital was at Sakala, which is a modern Sialkot in Punjab. And he invaded the Ganga Yamuna Doab, and he was converted to Buddhism by Nagasena. Nagasena is also known as Nagarjuna. Menander asked Nagasena many questions that is related to Buddhism, and these questions and Nagasena's answers, they were recorded in the form of a book, and that book is known as Milinda Panha or the Questions of Milinda. The Indo-Bactrian rule, it is very important in the history of India because of the large number of coins which the Greeks issued. The Indo-Greeks, they were the first rulers in India to issue coins, and that can be attributed to the kings. And this is not possible in the case of early punch-marked coins. The Indo-Greeks were the first to issue gold coins in India, and the Kushanas increased the number of gold coins in India. The Sakas. The Greeks were followed by Sakas, and the Sakas, they controlled a much larger part of India than the Greeks did. And there were 5 branches of Sakas with their seat of power in different parts of India and Afghanistan. One branch of Sakas, they settled in Afghanistan, and another branch of Sakas, they settled in Punjab with Taxila as their capital. And a third branch, they settled in Mathura, where they ruled for about 2 centuries. And the fourth branch, it established its hold over Western India, where they continued to rule till 4th century AD. And the fifth branch of Sakas, they established its power in Upper Deccan. The most famous Saka ruler was Rudradhaman I, and he ruled over Sindh, Kutch and Gujarat. He also recovered from Satavahanas, Konkan, the Narmada Valley, Malwa and Kathiawar. Rudradhaman I, he is famous in history because of the repairs he undertook to improve the Sudarshana lake in semi-arid zone of Kathiawar. And this lake had been in use for irrigation for a long time, and it was as old as the time of Mauryas. Rudradhaman, he was a great lover of Sanskrit. Even though the foreigner, he settled in India, he issued the first ever long inscription in chaste Sanskrit. The Parthians. The Saka domination in northwestern India, it was followed by Parthians. In many ancient Indian Sanskrit texts, the two peoples are together mentioned as Saka Pahalvas. So these people, they ruled over this country on parallel lines for some time. Originally, the Parthians, they lived in Iran, and from there they moved to India. So in comparison with the Greeks and Sakas, they occupied only a small portion of northwestern India in the 1st century. And the famous Parthian king was Gondophares. And during his reign, Saint Thomas is said to have come to India for the propagation of Christianity. And in that time, Parthians, like the Sakas, before them, they became an integral part of polity and society. The Kushanas. The Parthians, they were followed by Kushanas. And Kushanas, they were also called as Yuchis or Tocharians. The Kushanas are said to be one of the 5 clans in which the Yuchi tribe was divided. So they were a nomadic people from the steppes of north, which is in Central Asia. So living in the neighborhood of China, the Kushanas first, they occupied Bactria, or which is also called as North Afghanistan. And from there they moved to Kabul Valley, and they seized Gandhara by crossing the Hindu Kush and replacing the rule of Greeks and Parthians. And finally, they set up their authority over Lower Indus Basin and the greater part of Gangetic Basin. So we come across 2 successive dynasties of Kushanas. The first dynasty, it was founded by a house of chiefs who were called Cadphises, and they ruled for 28 years, that is about 50 AD, and it had 2 kings. The first was Cadphises I, and he issued coins south of the Hindu Kush. He minted coppers in imitation of Roman coins. And the second king was Cadphises II, and he issued a large number of gold money, and he spread his kingdom east of the Indus. The most famous Kushana ruler was Kanishka. So outside the border of India, he seems to have suffered defeat at the hands of Chinese, and he is known to history because of 2 reasons. First, he started an era in 78 AD, which is known as Saka era, and it is used by the government of India. And secondly, Kanishka extended his wholehearted patronage to Buddhism. So he held a Buddhist council in Kashmir, where the doctrines of Mahayana form of Buddhism were finalized. The successors of Kanishka continued to rule in northwestern India. So what were the impact of Central Asian contacts? Structure and pottery. The Saka Kushan phase, it registered a distinct advance in Building activities. Excavations revealed several layers of structures. So we find the use of burnt bricks for flooring and that of tiles for both flooring and roofing. But the use of surkey and tiles may not have been adopted from outside. So this period is also marked by the construction of brick wells, and its typical pottery is red ware pottery, both plain and polished with medium to fine fabric. Trade and technology. The Sakas and Kushanas, they added new ingredients to Indian culture and they enriched it immensely. They settled in India for good and completely identified themselves with its culture. They introduced better cavalry and the use of the riding horse on a large scale. The Sakas and Kushanas introduced turban, tunics, trousers and heavy long coat. Even now the Afghans and Punjabis, they wear turbans, and the Sherwani, it is a successor of long coat. So the Central Asians, they also brought in cap, helmet and boots which were used by various, and because of this advantages they made a clean sweep of their opponents in Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. Polity. The Kushanas adopted the pompous title of King of Kings. This indicates their supremacy over numerous small princes. The Sakas and Kushanas, they strengthened the idea of divine origin of kingship. The Kushanas were called sons of God, and this title was adopted by Kushanas from Chinese, who called their king the son of heaven. They introduced a satrap system of government. Here the empire was divided into numerous satrapas, and each satrapis, it was placed under the rule of a satrap. The practices such as hereditary, dual rule, two kings ruling in the same kingdom at one and the same time, it were introduced by the Kushanas. So we can find that the father and son, they ruled jointly at one and the same time. So it appears that there was less of centralization under these rulers. Religion. So some foreign rulers, they were converted to Vaishnavism, which means worship of Vishnu, who is said to be the god of protection and preservation. And few other rulers, they adopted Buddhism. The famous Greek ruler called Menander, he was converted to Buddhism, and the questions and the answers he exchanged with Buddhist teacher called Nagasena, who is also called as Nagarjuna, he constitutes a good source of cultural history of post-Maurya period. The Kushana rulers, they worship both Shiva and Buddha, and the images of these gods appeared on the Kushana coins. And several Kushana rulers, they were the worshippers of Vishnu, and this was certainly the case with Kushana ruler Vasudeva, whose very name is a synonym for Krishna and who was worshipped as an incarnation of Lord Vishnu. The other impact of Central Asian contacts is the origin of Mahayana Buddhism. So they did not appreciate the philosophical doctrines of Buddhism, which is emphasized by existing Buddhist schools. They wanted something which they could easily understand and which would satisfy their religious cravings. Literature and learning. So it seems that some of the great creative writers such as Ashvaghosha enjoyed the patronage of Kushanas. Ashvaghosha wrote Buddha Charita, which is a biography of Buddha. He also composed Soundarananda, which is a fine example of Sanskrit Kavya. Some of the important books of this genre were Mahavastu and Divyadhana. Science and technology. Indian astronomy and astrology, it profited from contact with the Greeks. So we notice many Greeks term about the movement of planets in Sanskrit text. Indian astrology, it came to be influenced by Greek ideas, and from the Greek term horoscope, it was derived the term Horashastra, that is used for astrology in Sanskrit. The Indians did not owe anything that strikes to Greeks in medicine, botany and chemistry, and these three subjects that is medicine, botany and chemistry, it were dealt with Charaka and Sushruta. The Charaka Samhita, it contains number of numerous plants and herbs from which drugs are to be prepared for the use of patients. So in the field of technology, also the Indian seems to have profited from the contact with Central Asia. Kanishka is represented as wearing trousers and long boots, and possibly the practice of making leather shoes began in India during this period. So we can say that the contacts of Rome with ancient India, it has introduced new practices in technology. So working in glass during this period, it was especially influenced by foreign ideas and practices. And in no other period in India did glass making make such a progress as it did during this period. So in the next session, let's discuss about the age of Satavahanas. Thank you.